The fifth process of the Align Plan and Organize domain, called Manage Portfolio, has 6 practices. The first practice is to establish the target investment mix. From a RACI charts perspective, the entities that are responsible for this practice are the Chief Executive Officer and the Chief Financial Officer. The entity that is held accountable is the board. The practice receives several inputs, which include the investment criteria from the EDM2 process, the strategic roadmap and risk assessments from the APO2 process, and the prioritization of IT initiatives from the APO6 process. The practice generates several outputs as well, which are the defined investment mix and the identified required resources, both to be used internally, and the feedback on strategy to be used by the APO2 process. The activities included in this practice include validating that the current service and IT investments are aligned with the enterprise strategy, and reaching an agreement with the business functions on the potential and required IT opportunities. An investment mix should be created, taking into consideration the budget, risks, and long and short-term returns. The categories of the required information systems, applications, and IT services should be identified. The second practice is to determine the sources of funding. From a RACI charts perspective, the entities that are responsible are the Chief Information Officer and the business executives. The entity that is held accountable is the Chief Financial Officer. This practice receives no inputs from internal or external sources. It generates 2 outputs, which are the funding options to be used by the APO2 process, and the investment return expectations to be used by several other processes. The activities included in this practice include identifying the current availability and commitment of funds, and the approved amount to spend. The options to obtain additional funds should be identified, and the implications of the funding sources on the investment return expectations. The third practice is to evaluate and select which programs to fund. From a RACI charts perspective, the entities that are responsible for this practice include the Chief Financial Officer, the business executives, and the Chief Information Officer. The entity that is held accountable is the Chief Executive Officer. The practice receives a wide range of inputs that include the evaluation of investment portfolio and the investment criteria from the EDM2 process, the budget allocations from the APO6 process, and the service level agreements from the APO9 process. It generates several outputs that include the program business case to be used by the APO6 and BAI1 processes, and the selected programs to be used by the EDM2 and BAI1 processes. The activities included in this practice include recognizing investment opportunities, and specifying the potential expected outcomes, risks, and costs. Detailed assessments of the programs should be performed, along with evaluations of their alignment with the enterprise strategy. The candidate programs to be invested in and implemented should be selected, and moved into the investment portfolio. Each selected program should have a full life cycle defined, along with the expected milestones to be achieved.